ahead and get started. You probably already know this. I'm your TA. My name is Boaz. I sit back there usually doing stuff for Bishop while he's up here. He's gone today, so while the cat is away, the mice will play. And on that note, we are going to talk about utilitarianism. And I don't really have a good art piece for utilitarianism, but I do have a good math formula for utilitarianism. So this isn't really something you can interpret, but let me just hear what this looks like. Like, what do you think this would be useful for? Anyone? And just tell me some basic stuff about it.
Something to do with ionic calculus?
Yes. Yes, it does. Any other observations? I mean, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, we have more complex formulas for, like, pressure of a gas. Like, really simple, basic stuff. I mean, Newton's equations for, force look about as complex as this. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Here's the weird thing. This is called Ostwald's happiness formula. This is actually how to be happy. Okay? So let me plug this in here. So he's German. So this is Glück. Glück, which means happiness. So you have Glück. It's actually got an umlaut, so I'm going to say it weird. Glück. And you have this K. Well, I'll get to the K. The K is the fun part. You have A, which is energy that you spend on, like, good work, like going for a run or doing something smart. That's good work that you spend. So positive E, positive energy. And then W, it's probably German for something. I don't know German. But it is the energy you spend just messing around, not being productive, just hanging out, eating Twinkies, playing Nintendo, listening to rap music. That would fall under here. And then same for here. You have plus E, and then you have the bad E. Okay. K is this weird psychological constant. He was a chemist and he was really into thermodynamics. So K is this ratio that he thought the energy that you had to spend turning this work into psychological happy units. So it's like a converter. This is the converter. So let me give you an example. I'm having a pretty good day. I went on a run, so we'll count that as 2. And then I did homework, so we'll count that as 3. So I have, like, let's say 5 units of happiness. But I also slept in. So that's like minus 2 works I didn't do. Okay? So you factor that, and you're going to get something like, you got to FOIL this. I don't do math. That's not why I'm here. So let's just say you have, like, plus 7. Okay? That's your happiness. Put that through the convert, you get Glück. Okay? If you got a positive number, congratulations, Guttenheim, you have good Glück. You're a good guy. If this is negative, it's going to go through the converter. It's going to give you, I don't know German, so not Glück. You're not happy. You are not happy. And, well, that's how utilitarianism works. At least, that's how the hedonistic calculus works. This is a really good example of what Jeremy Bentham tried to do. So you sort of quantify everything, quantify your work and your bad work, and then put it in an equation, add it all up. What comes out? Glück, our happiness. So, Any observations? Any observations? Okay. I tend to get really caught up because I'm also a dance instructor. So if I start going really fast and you have a question, just stop me. Okay. So, to give you an idea of utilitarianism, I'm a big picture guy. I don't just like to drop a thing right here and then leave it out of context. Context is important, especially for utilitarianism and all the weird stuff about it and all the cool stuff about it. There's some cool stuff. I don't think so. Some people do. So, I'm going to give you a real brief outline of how history developed in modernity. Okay? So, here's the typical story that I'm sure you'll hear. We're in the medieval period. I'm not good with chalk, so I'm just going to draw a church. Okay? And then we have the Reformation and Luther. And you know, he wasn't down with all the Dark Age stuff. You know, he had the whole freedom of religion, priesthood of all believers. You know, he opened the door for less hierarchy, less control. So him and Descartes, they opened the door for individualism. You know, I think, therefore I am. Like, the individual becomes the focus of philosophy. And then for Luther, the individual becomes the focus for religion, too. And ever since that, Descartes, can't read that. Ever since then, we've been on an upward tick toward, I don't know, like utopia, cool things, technology, something to do with that. But things have been gotten better. These are the Dark Ages, you know? These are bad. Now we're enlightened, okay? We're cool. We're hip. We know. We know things. They didn't. I'm really bad at making this document. That's what you typically tend to hear. Okay? And since then, when this happened, everyone has just been getting rid of the old moral stuff. That was oppressive. That was, you know, being controlled by the Pope. Since then, we've been getting more moral. We've been getting smarter and more enlightened, more moral. We're better people. No. What did they know? They had horses and diseases. They didn't have cars. Didn't have health. They just listened to other people. We know. That's it. That's typically what you get. That's typically what you're told. Dark Ages, Enlightenment. But here's another way of thinking of it. I should leave this up. Over here. So, you have what was called the Dark Ages, typically. Whatever. And then you have this period. Then there's that gap again, that beginning of modernity. That started with Descartes and Luther again. But instead of everything having this utopian uptick, things get a lot more chaotic. So some people go this direction, some people go that direction, some people go here, and here, and here. And it just sort of becomes chaos. But what some people, the people who are considered the enlightened ones, try to do is take the cultural ideals that they inherited from the Dark Ages and try to make them work. despite all this fracture. So in this narrative, things are certainly not the best here. But since the beginning of modernity, we just sort of lost it. And then this uptick was actually just an attempt not to lose it more. Squeaky. But it's actually just been going down. And on this view of history, what these enlightened people were trying to do, people like the ones we're going to talk about today, like Bentham and Mill, not Nietzsche, definitely not Nietzsche, but Bentham and Mill, on this view, what they were trying to do is they inherited cultural morality. Morality from a culture that was largely Christianized, like saturated with it. Not necessarily in a good way, but the ideals that they were drawing from, what they considered moral, was passed down from them, from people and people and people who were like kind of culturally Christian. And what that looks like is that culture had these three ideals. So one of those things was autonomy. And that was an ideal that mainly budded from that Descartes and that Luther revolution of think for yourself and worship for yourself. And these are all things that were developing after the Reformation, keep in mind. So autonomy started becoming a culture as the Reformation and as modern philosophy was on the uptick, was just getting started. After that, another ideal of the culture at the time, benevolence. But here's where it gets a little bit warped, because this is kind of a Christian ideal, but it's not strong. I mean, all these are kind of diluted, and they've been through all sorts of different cultures. This benevolence isn't just like this vague, like, love your neighbor as yourself or anything. It has social goods. So the common good. You need to do things that benefit all of humanity in a large-scale way, in a political way. It's like what Francis Bacon said about science. The point of science is to improve the human condition in a big way. And then the third one? Was efficiency. And this, the culture actually got, believe it or not, from the Puritan movements, because they were all about their vocation. Well, their career was their vocation. How hard they worked, cobbling shoes together or working on the farm. That's what they considered to be true worship. It wasn't listening to the Pope or listening to hierarchy. It was taking your job, even if it sucks, and working hard at it. And these three ideals were all over Europe. There's not a single person after the Dark Ages who did not appeal to these three ideals. Everyone had some sense of autonomy. Everyone had some sense of benevolence in like a I want to benefit all of humanity kind of way. And everyone wanted to be efficient. Everyone wanted to be successful in an economic way. I'm going to connect that. Just keep that in mind. So that's a cultural background. Now, Bishop in the last classes, do you remember him talking about the noumena and the phenomena? Let's review those a little, because those are important for context too. So you have the noumena, and you have the phenomena. I know it's kind of hard to tell them apart. I know, because one's just phi, and the other one is without phi. The way I remember it, though, this comes from Greek, nous, which is mind. When you're thinking about these things, you're using your head. You're getting at true reality. Your mind is engaged. Phenomena, that's a Greek root. Phino, that's where we get phantom from. So when you're just looking at the phenomena, you're just looking at the phantoms. Here's Spot. That's a dog. It's the real dog. Woof woof. That's the phenomena. It's just a bunch of bundles, sensory bundles. Here's the image of a dog, and here's the smell of a dog, and there's the touch of the dog's fur. But you're not getting that real Spot, woof woof. You're just getting at the phenoms, the phantoms. Now, the background that Mill and Bentham are going to work from largely agrees with Kant. We can't get to this. We can't get to Spot, woof woof. We can only get to image of Spot. Or did I say Spike? Spike? Spike, woof woof. Sorry. We can only see bits and pieces. But we're not using the nous. We're not using our minds. We're not getting at the true thing. We're just getting at the fake thing. The image thing. And this is the attitude that Bentham and Mill had to work with. This was more or less the attitude of Locke. Locke was the first empiricist. He was all about, I don't care about the philosophy stuff. I don't care about scholasticism and all that empty talk about, God and angels and stuff we can't see or touch. I want to deal with the stuff we can interact with. So he would be over here. Whoops. So this is dead. And so is my chalk. This is dead for Locke. A little after Locke, Hume comes in. Now Hume is the big deal player for the Enlightenment. He's like Brad Pitt in Ocean's 11. He's the major player. He's the one everyone is asking what to think about this. And his thing is that we're entirely empirical. We don't care about philosophy or metaphysics or the nous. For all we know, people are just making that up so that they can control us later on, so that they can tell us what to do. But we know. We should throw all their books into the flames. He actually says that at the end of his book. If it contains metaphysics and something that I can't prove empirically with my hands or my eyes or my feet, we need to throw it away. We need to burn it. Because all we have is this phenomenological, the phenos, the phantasms. So the reality that the British thinkers are working at this point, there's no transcendental realm where God lives, or where souls are, or where Spike is, woof woof. Let's not deal with that. At the very best, we should just be agnostic about that. We can't have proof of that. So let's not care. All we have is the here and now. What I can touch, what I can see, what I can tap with my feet. And that really limits where you can draw morality from. Okay? So, does everyone have this? Can I erase it? So Kant, for example, he had all the stuff around him, the phantasms, but there was also that world where the categorical imperative is. You know, the forms of logic. I like to think of Kant, because he's kind of weird, as Plato. So there are these forms, and they're off in this transcendental realm where, you know, God lives. Except instead of it being like form of a horse or form of a chair, it's like form of a logic, form of math. And he does try to get to that. But he's very pessimistic. But he does try to get there. And this is where he tries to get morality from. And he tries really hard. He kind of fails, and it kind of is the reason that some people just turn nihilist about it and say we can't know it. That's a different time. He does try to get here. He's not limited to down here. He can transcend it. Try to find something else. Try to find a grounding of morality. Did we have the recommended reading of like grounding of metaphysics and morals, Kant? Okay. I kind of say this with a grain of salt because that book's incredibly complicated and it's also in German, which is the most complicated language. But that's where he tries to escape this and get to these so that he has a grounding, an absolute grounding of morality that will never shift no matter what. So that's why he's saying, like, someone's down here and you have, what was it, a Nazi comes to your door and he's asking, are you hiding prisoners? You know, that's going on down here. That's changing. Everything is flux down here. The forms are still the same. And he's always going to appeal to those in any situation, no matter what the phantasms are doing. British Enlightenment doesn't have this. British Enlightenment, like Hume, all you have is the phantasms. All you have is what's around us, right here, right now. Right here, right now. And that really limits where you can draw morality from. No more this. You have to draw your morality from around here. And what's the most obvious thing in your lived experience that you can draw from? Your feelings. Pleasure and pain. And that's what Hume says. Morality is pleasure and pain. And ultimately, that's what we mean by morality. We're saying something's moral because it's pleasurable. We're saying something's bad because it causes pain. That's really all we have left to track in a universe like this, with no noumena and with no forms either. If we just have phantasms, all we have to go off of is what we're feeling. Now, here's an important point about Hume. If someone said this now in this culture, they'd be like a YOLOer, right? They'd be like Drake, like, I'm just going to party, I'm just going to do what I want. Don't oppress me. Here's the funny thing, though. Hume was more conservative than a lot of Christians at his time. He was very conservative. But he was like the first new atheist. Like, people like Richard Dawkins look up to him. And why is that? He was still very conservative. He still went to church even. He was very skeptical. But he still did things like attend the occasional service. He was a good guy. Very social, very nice. Didn't YOLO at all. He didn't like YOLO. Why is that? It's because of those three ideals that I was just telling you about. It was because even though the Christianity from what we say is the Dark Ages, from Catholicism, from the hierarchy, the Catholic hierarchy, had lost its momentum, had lost its authority, the culture was still kind of nominally Christian. I mean, it's kind of like today when, people are just going about their day until they get really stressed. And then they, cross themselves and they say a prayer, Lord Jesus, help me through this. And then once it's gone, they kind of just go about their day. It's kind of like that. You already see that a little. Except it's way stronger in Hume's time. And it's just assumed to be objective morality. Like, this is what good people do. We're not the Romans. And we're not the Greeks. We don't get drunk and party all the time. That's pre-Dark Ages. That's darker than the Dark Ages. We know. We're the good guys. We're efficient, and we're nice, and we're autonomous. We think for ourselves. Any questions? Yep. Doing good. It's in Hume's metaphysic, in Hume's philosophy, that we get Jeremy Bentham. And right when Hume was publishing all his stuff that said that, Bentham was in diapers. Just born. Just learning how to walk. So he really took it in. He grew up in it. He was born in it. Like Bane. He was born in the darkness. We just adopted him. And his hedonistic calculus, in a way, is just systematizing, formalizing what Hume said in kind of broad brushstrokes. So it's like, have you ever seen those little doodles that you can buy as a kid and you just draw them in with markers? You add the color to it. That's what I like to think Bentham and Mill did in a way. Bentham takes Hume's idea that all we have to go off of for morality is pleasure and pain. And he says, you know, that's a great idea. It's not systematic enough. I want to figure out how to do it perfect. Because we got to be moral. We got to be benevolent. And we got to know it. Because we're autonomous. We think for ourselves. So Bentham's idea is we're going to give everything a number. And we're going to give the pros and cons for any action. Our outcome. We're going to quantify them. And at the bottom, we're going to add this up, and we're going to subtract this, and we're going to get Gluck. You know what I'm saying? Gluck, or we're going to get the moral thing to do. So let me give you an example of this. I think we're all a little bit guilty of this, and I know I am. So I'm going to put myself on the chopping block because I have definitely, literally done this exact thing before. I used to play football, and at one point in my football career, I was offered like an opportunity to go to a different school, and I was kind of on the fence about it. So you know what I did? Because I was in high school, I was kind of stupid. I made this exact kind of line, and I just did a hedonistic calculus. So I said, what's a pro going to that school? It's nicer. The people, cooler. But on the other hand, the program might not be as good. And I don't know about the cafeteria food. Might not be great. Might be subpar. And so I went down this for like a couple pages. And then I give everything a number. So the people are nice. That's important to me. Nice people are important. So I'm going to give that like a +5. And then cool people. Cool people are great. So I'm going to give that like a +3. And then football, I don't know how important that is. Is it more important than nice people? Is it more important than cooler people? I don't know. What should I do? I'm going to say that's like a -4. That sounds right. That feels right. The food, I think, is less important than nice or cool people. That's pretty obvious. So I'm just going to give that like a +1. And at the end of it, you know, I have this big number over here. So let's say like 57. And then the cons were like -10. So that meant that in moral units, it was a 47 unit plus to go to the school. And then I erased it. Well, I kept it, but I'm going to erase this one. And then I did it for the other school. And I said, hey, these people are rude. They stuff people into lockers. That's unacceptable. That's like a -6. But the program might be a little bit better. Now, what is that compared to rude people? I think that's like a 7. That seems right. And then blah, 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 blah. And then it's like, say, +40. And the cons were like -30. And then I plugged that in. 40 minus 30, that's 10. I am almost 5 times more happy transferring to that good school with the cool people and the bad food than staying at this school where the football players are good but they stuff people into lockers. That's just subjective. Okay? It's obvious. And this is essentially the style that Bentham went about putting morality into. You make a chart, add up the consequences, add up the good consequences, add up the bad consequences. Give a number to each of them. And then you'll get a result that's Gluck. And that's moral. And he had this idea that the world was essentially this big cauldron. That doesn't look like a cauldron. I'll add a fire at the bottom. And sticks. So it looks like a cauldron now. Yeah, it's bubbling. It's a cauldron. It's looking good. That's the world. And the water is the net pleasure. And this cauldron has a bunch of holes. That's what every person and animal is. So you have Spike over here. Woof woof. And you have yourself over here. And then you have all your bros and your lady bros over here. I'm terrible with chalk. And he said, what you want to do while you're doing this is make sure that you're not taking too much pleasure out of the cauldron or dumping in too much pain so that it can sort of evenly disperse so that we can be benevolent. Because benevolence, we're good people. We can't just take it all for ourselves. We can't be a utility monster or a pleasure monster, just sucking this all up for ourselves. We have to give it. We have to give it. And we need to make sure also, not only this, but also that it's just not dumping all the pleasure onto ourselves. Because that's selfish. That's not benevolent. Now, let's rip this apart. Who notices something silly I did when I was putting all these numbers together? I'm on the chopping block here, so don't hold back.
Well, in this one you put football as like a +7, whereas the other one you only put like a -2.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you have to keep them the same?
Well, oh yeah, I did.
Wait, you said nice people is more important than football in the last table.
Yeah, I did. But see, what I was doing was I was comparing the, what was it, cool people and nice people to football, and I realized, hey, the football is a less important good than the cool people and the nice people, so I'm going to make it reflect that. But y'all are picking up on something. How do you assign a number to something like football? How do you assign it to rude people? And most importantly, how do you compare the two objectively? What is the mathematical formula that tells me that football is slightly more important than rude people and more important than bad food, but not as important as cool, nice people? What's the measure for that? Is there a measure for that? What do you think? Anyone?
I mean, I don't think you really can measure it, like, as in put, like, I don't know, so far in numbers, that's just really, I don't know how you would do it. And plus, like, I think it's like when you compare, like, football to people, like, football might have, like, a greater, like, impact on your life, or maybe, like, the people have greater impact on your life. So it's like taking, like, the weighted averages versus just the average of the things. So you gotta, like, take into account of that, like, when you were studying.
Good. And this is actually one of the big criticisms of things like hedonistic calculus. It's all predicated on being able to take a substantial good, like nice people, and sort of reduce it down to this nice, happy, sexy little number that then you can put into the happiness formula and find Gluck. But what's the magic bullet to get you here? How do you reduce something as contextual and as personal as a nice person into a number? And not only that, how do you weigh that according to football? Because that seems to have nothing to do with nice people. Those guys are mean. What do they have to do with it?
It seems really entirely subjective. It's like how nice you think of you are depending on like who you met in your past. Right? So,
Exactly.
So it's different for everyone.
Yes.
And, and also niceness might not matter for someone. Maybe they were brought up well without nice people, and they still turned out decently, I guess.
But we're all benevolent. We're all cool guys. We know. We're enlightened. So it's not subjective. This is absolute objective morality. Because everyone in European culture has the same ideals. And they're more or less going to say, nice people, +6. And rude people, -5. Because again, remember the ideals. Benevolence, autonomy, efficiency. Or here's what you could do. You could make an assessment. Say, well, okay, I'm not going to be able to use football for this one. Or actually, no, I might. So, instead of just making this just a subjective number, let's attach it to something we can measure in numbers all the time, like efficiency, or like money, or like resources saved. And this is where it's getting into medical ethics, because you see this in medical ethics a lot. So, let's say if I go to football at that school, I'm going to be way more efficient. And I'm going to be way more productive because I'm happier, because the people are nice, and I'm going to get my homework done faster. And that's going to save me X amount of hours. Let's say 5 hours a week, because I'm not moping around. I'm getting things done. I'm being efficient. Whereas if I stay here at this old school, people are getting stuffed into lockers. I have to waste my time getting people out of lockers. That's a good 4 hours that I've wasted that I can't spend on homework and being efficient and benevolent. Well, I am being benevolent, but I'm not being efficient. So maybe having all these nice people and playing football at this new school, maybe here's a way to make it more objective. I save 5 hours a week, versus over here, I waste 4 hours a week. Now that certainly seems better, yeah? It's not so subjective anymore. But at the same time, you kind of have to play God a little bit. You have to know all the circumstances and all the consequences from where you are right now. And you have to know all these. And you have to make the assumption that that 5 hours, every week's going to be like that. Every week. And people are going to get stuffed into lockers every week. 4 hours of stuffing in lockers every week. Good Lord. So then an epistemology problem comes into play. How do I know this? How do I know that? Don't I have to be kind of a determinist about people to assume that this is going to hold all the time and that's going to hold all the time? And that this, even though it's more objective because it's efficiency hours now, is actually better than this. So let's move on and add Mill into this. Mill actually takes some of the subjective parts out. He realizes this. He realizes this is too subjective. It does not have a settled standard. It needs that if it's going to work. So he has something very similar. He has the cauldron again, but he also has a very set form of the good and what human nature is and what's good for us and what's bad for us. So there's pleasure now, and there's still pros and cons, but it's not so subjective because Mill doesn't say, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room. Like, I'm just going to read what I want into this and give it a random number. Mill says, no, no, bad. We have a single standard of humanity, although he does say we kind of don't. But I'm going to get into that. Being brave is a good thing. Being a coward is a bad thing. And being tolerant of other people is a good thing. Being authoritarian is a bad thing. So he has a very set form of what the good is and what the bad is. And this is looking pretty good, right? I mean, these are just things that everybody knows. It's good to be brave. It's good to be tolerant. Don't be a coward. But be a smart guy. And think for yourself. Here's the weird thing. Mill actually got a lot of these ideas from Plato. Plato has this dialogue called The Protagoras. And Socrates is arguing with a guy. He's a sophist. He's the arch-sophist of all the sophists. His name's Protagoras. That's why. It's a weird name. And one of the arguments he uses to get Protagoras to really get his goat that the philosophers are better than the sophists is he appeals to this idea of a good nature and the good-natured man. And he says, here's my ideal of human nature. And according to that, that person would be happier. So, a good person is courageous. They have more pleasure being courageous than a coward does. Because the nature of a person flourishes more when they're courageous. Whereas a coward, he's just sulking in a corner. He's not flourishing. And it's better to think for yourself because human beings are made to think. And not just not think. Listen to somebody else. And so we flourish if we think. But the thing about Plato that you're not supposed to do if you're a good British Enlightenment thinker, Plato believed in the forms, along with Kant. If he had heard Hume saying, we're only limited to right here and right now, he would raise hell. And in fact, most of the people he argued against said the same thing as Hume. So how are we going to take the British Enlightenment, which is just the phenomenal, the phantasms, and the not spike, woof woof, and how are we going to shove Plato in there and his conception of the human good when his conception of the human good depended on the forms, depended on him being able to appeal outside of the phantasms into a world where the British Enlightenment said we couldn't go. So Mill does manage to save this. And this is what's called rural utilitarianism. Whereas Bentham's is just basic consequentialism. Okay? Take note of that. Mill is the rural utilitarianism. Bentham is the consequentialist. They're different. Because one of them has a human good at play and a very set standard of what the good is for humans and bases the hedonistic calculus off of that. Consequentialists will basically say, you put in your own ideals and you do your own math, and you get your own good. And that's the weird thing about Mill. That's the tension that a lot of commentators have picked up on in Mill. You would think, taking things like this, with a single set standard from Plato, you would end up like Plato. You know, Plato's thing is, We have to have a republic, and we have to have philosopher kings, and they need to be guiding other people toward what they should do. They shouldn't be allowed to do stupid things. We got to have some control. We have to have some guidance. Mill could not disagree with that more. Okay? Mill outright says in On Liberty, the recommended reading, if someone wants to do something stupid, you got to let them do something stupid. That's not only a good, that's what our entire society is founded on. Giving people the freedom to do things even if it's dumb. And that flies in the face of it. So we have this unstable mix between Plato and those culturally Christian ideals but now we're starting to see some YOLOing, right? We're starting to see some flavor. But then we have the negative freedom over here. I like to call it YOLO, because I'm a hip-hop instructor. YOLO. So on the one hand, there's this tension. There are two things kind of fighting it out in Mill. There's the old, kind of authoritarian, kind of paternalistic, like, here's the good, go toward it. But now you have this, let me do what I want, even if it's stupid. But at the same time, Mill himself was over here. He would never, ever, ever have endorsed the kind of YOLOing we do today. He was an old white guy, very conservative. So that raises the question, why today do we see this kind of thing happening? Do we see basic consequentialism and people appealing to their feelings to justify morality, but instead of the Plato, the coming back to Plato, instead of coming back to, let's be good guys, let's benefit society, we have YOLOing. Why is that? Where did those go? The basic answer, because Nietzsche. Okay? Does anyone have any experience with Friedrich Nietzsche? Okay. Okay. Everyone else is like doctors, right? Okay, that's fine. I don't know why you would ever know Nietzsche for medical science. He's not a medical science at all. But he's a philosopher. He's kind of like the queen of the postmoderns. He's a cultural figure. He's a paradigm shifter. He changed everything. And he comes in late 1800s, yeah? Beginning of the late 1800s, beginning of the 20th century. And he sees this for what it is. He says to all the moderns who try to do this, to Bentham and Mill and Kant, you idiots. And that's not really hyperbole, like he says, y'all are idiots. You've taken Christianity and you just try to shove it in here. What are these but diluted, corrupted Christian ideals? Get rid of those. Plato sucks. What is Christianity but Platonism for the people? Also, just appealing to these forms, appealing to God, saying this is objective. But all Christianity is actually doing is holding back the human race. Because it's oppressive. And because it's not flourishing. It's life negating. We need to have warriors. Like Homer. Homer knew what he was doing. Achilles knew what he was doing. And Nietzsche calls himself the Dionysian. Does anyone know who Dionysus was? Close. Yeah.
Wine.
Yes, partying wine. And there was a Dionysian cult. And those people were the first YOLOers. Believe it or not. More or less. They didn't have all these Christian ideals. But let's pray for someone. Let's be nice to everyone. Because that's holding back. That's building resentment. And Nietzsche was all about resentment and getting over it. We got to get over it. People want to be mean, and they want to be the best. So let's let them. That's how evolution works. So he's going to get rid of all that. And he's basically going to accuse Mill and Bentham and Kant of just being kind of closet Christians. But I thought we got over that when we were enlightened. We're over it. Nietzsche says, time for something new. So let's be Dionysian. And that's when you start getting this real loss of this. I mean, this is postmodernity. This is getting rid, this is deconstructing to get rid of all the authoritarian stuff and all the infected culture ideals that are holding us back. So that we can get to the Dionysian stuff. So that we can get to something good. And that puts this, looking back on it, in a really awkward position. Because as y'all pointed out, as I was doing in the beginning, I'm just making up numbers and giving them a value that I already have, that I already think, and I'm essentially just reading my own biases and values back into it and giving it a number so it looks all nice. What am I doing other than morality by emotions, though? Morality by previous values. And this is what the postmoderns and Alistair MacIntyre, you should read him, he's a cool guy, Bishop loves him, call emotivism. Obviously, because it's emotions. Emotivism. You're just letting your emotions dictate what morality you want to do, and you're putting it in this nice, pretentious little thing so that it looks objective. So this is either that, or maybe it's the culture. Maybe it's what Mill was doing. But aren't all those things just oppressive? That was the Dark Ages. We're enlightened now. We know. We're cool. We're hip. We're benevolent and autonomous. So that doesn't seem like a good option either. Or do we want to be really pessimistic about what we're doing? Do we want to be real suspicious and say that all we're doing here is Nietzsche? We just have this will to power. We're just being driven by our evolutionary instincts. And we're just trying to convince everyone that we're a nice guy. We're trying to get the illusion so that we can do whatever we want. So now all that culture, all the brakes, basically you might say, all the stoppers, Nietzsche pulled them out. Said if we want to go there, we're going there. Full throttle. And now I want to give you all the example of how this cashes out in bioethics, in medical ethics. So John Harris is a crazy logical man. Why did I write that? Who is John Harris? He's an Oxford bioethicist. University of Oxford, works in the bioethics department. He's basing his logic off of Bentham and Mill, except Mill without all the Christian stuff, because that's oppressive. But with the cauldron of pleasure, but not any of the Christian stuff holding us back. He says, imagine if we had a lottery, okay? A genetic lottery. And we said, the government said, we're going to enroll everyone in our society in this lottery, and every, year or so, we're going to pull some numbers, and the people who get chosen, we kill them, and we take their organs, and we donate them to this person, and this person, and this person, and this person, and this person. Because think about all the organs you could have if someone just gave themselves up. You'd have a heart, you'd have lungs, you'd have lungs. You'd have kidneys, which look like tiny lungs now. Now they do. You'd have a whole lot of blood. What else would you have? You'd have a pancreas. So a pancreas, you'd have 2 lungs. Is there like an operation where people need eyes?
Yeah.
You'd have 2 eyes! You'd have 2 eyes. Smiley face. You have so much to give. You have so much to give. And you could increase 7 people's pleasure. They're going to die unless you give them your organs and you die. 7 people for the price of 1. 1 person has to die for 7 people to have a happy life with their family. What's wrong with that? I mean, we don't want to be cultural, and we're sure as hell not, in the Dark Ages anymore. We're not going to appeal to any of the Christian ideals. But we do have pleasure, and we do have pain. So he puts it to us at the end of this article. Basically, everyone would be so much happier if we were dead, so they could take our organs. We're so selfish, everyone in this room. We could benefit like 49 people right now if we died and donated every last one of our organs. Any questions? Any comments for this? I think this is wild. How much time do we have? 1 minute? Awesome. Okay, let me hear. I've been talking too much. Too much. Let me hear. Any comments, concerns? No? Need to think about it? Well, write down the guy's name. Look him up. Because if I remember last class, when we were talking about the Catholic has to give up objections to refer someone else, it seems like what we all want to say is that would benefit society the most. That would uphold freedom the most of the girl patient. And it would benefit society the most if this doctor compromised on this one little point and just went along with it. But if we want to say something like that, what else is that same sort of method going to put us into? Do we really want to bite the utilitarian bullet and just make it the hedonistic calculus? Or do we want to hold back? But can we hold back? Given Nietzsche. I don't know. Think about it. Bring it up to Bishop. I think my time is done. Thanks, y'all.